start in this way. Since we know today happens to be Easter, it is also expedient that we know that Easter is all about Jesus paying the ultimate price and as well rising from the grave, defeating sin and defeating death. As we are celebrating Jesus rising up, I think it is also very needed for us to know that he has to die in order for him to rise up. As much as we are celebrating his resurrection, we should also know that he died. And it took a whole lot of processes, such as he was betrayed, he was scourged, he was beaten, and then he was crucified before he ultimately died and eventually resurrected. So while we celebrate his life, his resurrection, we should not forget that there was a process. And part of the process was that he has to die. So let us stick with us and let's ensure that this Easter doesn't just feel or doesn't just look like every other Easters that we've been celebrating. But let's make this one truly count. So that is why I had to take us back to these processes so we can have a deeper reflection and to think and ponder rather than just paying attention to the fact that he has defeated sin and he has defeated death. But we must also understand that he took a whole lot of processes. He was betrayed for your sin. He died for my sin. So I think it's expedient I start in this way. Anyway, so by the mercies of God, we've been having a series titled The Name of God. And by the mercies of God, I will be speaking on Jehovah Nissi or Yahweh Nissi. So I just want us to realize that every name of God is tied to a certain revelation. So these are not just names that just came out of the blue, but there was more or less as a revelation, a revelational message that is being tied to this name. So I would like to take us back to the very first lesson or the very first time we started this series. The first name was Elohim, which was spoken by Brother Justin, which he did a very good job. But like as I said, I want us to have an understanding that these are not just names, but it was tied with revelation, and not just revelation, stories were behind these names. So the first one on our list was Elohim. So the whole context could be seen from Genesis chapter 14. And basically it involves the period wherefore Abraham had an encounter with Melchizedek, who happens to be the king of Salem. Melchizedek in itself means the king of righteousness. And Salem in itself means peace. So it was basically the king of righteousness and over a place called the kingdom of peace, if I would use that terminology. So he had an encounter with Abraham after Abraham defeated the kings. And he gave Abraham bread and wine. So it was Melchizedek that eventually revealed the name of God to Abraham, because as of then, Abraham doesn't even have an understanding of the God, the name of the God that he was worshipping, as the case was. So it was Melchizedek that told him, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High. It was from here that Abraham began to call God the Most High. Before, he doesn't have an understanding of who this God was. And you see, there was a reason why Melchizedek encountered him, because after Melchizedek encountered him, there was another king that also encountered Abraham, and he was called the king of Sodom. Now pay attention to the name. He's called Melchizedek, king of what? Salem. And like I said, Melchizedek in itself means king of righteousness. So the other king that eventually came to Abraham was called king of Sodom. And if it may interest you, the word Sodom in itself means corruption, profanity, and many things like that. I don't know if you get my point. So this was the second king that encountered him. And the second king called the king of Sodom began to try to do some sort of a bargain with Abraham. Wherefore he told Abraham, give me the people and keep for yourself the substance. But you see, Abraham did something that was quite remarkable. Abraham told him that I have swore to the Most High. And the significance why Abraham had to meet Melchizedek was that Melchizedek was basically making him understand that there is one that is called the Most High. He's the highest of all high. He's the highest of all king. So, and there was a need, it was needful for Melchizedek to give him bread and wine. Even though Melchizedek goes by the name that I am Melchizedek, the king of Salem, a priest of the Most High. It means that God is your sustainer and God is your preserver. Even though you might be going through different situations as the case may be, but you should often have this understanding that God has the ability to preserve you, and God has the ability to keep you. That was the main reason why Abraham chose not to take anything from the king of Sodom, because he encountered what? Melchizedek, the king of Salem. So that was the revelation behind the name Elohim. And if you begin to apply through scripture, you will come to realize that God introduced himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of what? Jacob. If you check out their life, you will come to realize that at some point, these guys were having some sort of a limitation, like they were lacking. In the time of Jacob as well, he was lacking. He was almost making the same mistake Abraham made. He was going to Gerar before the Lord. He was basically trying to go to Egypt before the Lord told him to remain in that land. So all these things I'm trying to say was to make us understand that every revelation of God is tied by, every name of God is tied by a revelation. And by the mercies of God, today I will be speaking on Jehovah Nissi. And my intention as well is to make us unravel the mystery or the revelation that is also tied to this name, so we can effectively have an understanding of what we are saying. So when you are saying Jehovah Nissi, you have a proper understanding of what you're saying. If you're saying Jehovah Rapha, he heals, you have a understanding of what you're saying. And not just that you are just saying things without understanding. So I would like us to turn our Bible to the book of Exodus chapter 17. And I would like us to just read a couple of verses that unravel the mystery behind the name Jehovah Nissi. So Exodus chapter 17, I would like us to read from verse 9 for the sake of comprehension. So we'll just read down to 15. So the Bible said, and Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men, and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, And they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon, and Aaron and Hur stayed up his hand, the one on the one side and the other on the other side. And his hand were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in the book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. So basically, what this scripture was making us understand was that, you see, when Israel left Egypt in order to go claim their inheritance in the land which the Lord has promised their forefathers, Abraham, at that point in time, Israel was in his infant state as a nation. As a nation, Israel was in his infant state. So, but Amalek attacked Israel without any probable cause, without any plausible cause. And at that point in time, Moses had to do what he needed to do after consulting with the Lord. And the blueprint that was given to Moses was that Joshua would lead the soldiers to go confront Amalek. But evidently, Moses will have